to No Broken Legs. It is a special Ohio State edition. I am joined in-house by Jimmy Champ on a pretty cold and snowy Friday after Thanksgiving. Jimmy, how are you? Did you get enough to eat yesterday?
Oh, I got way more than enough to eat and more to eat some more later, so I'm feeling funky like a monkey, bro.
And also joining us over the phone is downtown Ronnie Brown, who specifically asked why we don't talk college football on the podcast, so we're forcing him to come on and do it. How are you today, Ron?
I'm doing great, fellas. Thanks for having me on. Also stuffed from way too much turkey and sweets.
Oh, yeah. But the sweetest thing of all this weekend would be an Ohio State victory over our hated rivals up north. The Ohio State Buckeyes come into this game. They are number 2 in the BCS. And Ron, kind of what is your season in review look at Ohio State thus far?
Yeah, it's real funny. I think we all came in with like really high expectations just from where they were ranked at the beginning of the season. And then I think if you could kind of even start off with that very first game against Minnesota, they looked good, but you didn't know how good they were going to be. And it was really how far would C.J. Stroud take them at quarterback, or if he was going to end up being that guy. And, I think I was victim of this, at the beginning of the season. We expect him to come in and just like hit the ground running and just be amazing. And we were so spoiled with like Justin Fields, who had kind of like a year to like prepare at Georgia, and then a full season in camp at Ohio State, and then he was able to kind of come in and do his thing. I think we got spoiled by that. So when CJ Stroud didn't replicate that exactly, we're kind of like, oh, maybe this guy's not the guy. He throws high, he misses a lot of throws, but to quote my wife, who knew that like an 18, 19-year-old kid would actually get better at something the more he tried, and that's
crazy
what
talk.
it is. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like we're all victims of being like that fan, and we try to put like on our like common sense hat, and we just like toss it off whenever we want to. And so like he really has. This team goes as far as he will take them in a lot of ways. I feel like he's the biggest piece to this puzzle. And he really runs this offense phenomenally. He knows exactly where to go with the ball. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And so, I mean, it's like night and day. And then obviously the other thing was that, like, on defense, Kerry Coombs was, like, not making those adjustments. I mean, at the Oregon game, they ran the same play 3 times for a touchdown. And, when we're at home noticing it, then you can tell something is wrong, But to their credit, they've made adjustments. They switched people around. They kind of went away from that single high look that they did, and now they mix it up, which is something I think is good. And it gives those players on defense, because they have 5 stars and 4 stars everywhere, it gives them a chance to kind of get acquainted to like how to play their position and figure out what they do best, and it makes you less predictable. And I think that's the best thing. So like, I mean, night and day, because it did not look like, I think we were all thinking at the beginning of the year, this is the season where Michigan finally gets us again, But now, it's changing. I mean, they're going to win eventually, right? You can't keep winning all these games, like
John Cooper even won 2 of these, despite his best efforts.
Yeah, I mean, I think even though we have that common sense, I think it was 2011 was the last time Michigan won, and that was when Tressel was gone, and you brought in Luke Fickell, who now this looks like a great hire, but then he didn't know, he was in over his head, and they barely lost that game to Michigan then in Ann Arbor. So now they just have been dominating ever since. So it's going to be a good game, I think.
All right, so Ohio State is coming off just a thrashing of Michigan State last week, and that was the same Michigan State team that should have lost to Michigan, but ended up beating them. Jimmy, the line sits at 7. You can find it as high as 8.5 if you want to throw some money on the Wolverines. What do you expect of this game tomorrow?
I don't know. It's one of the main reasons. I was excited when we were doing this pod and we were having Ron on, because Ron admittedly watches way more college football than we do. You're pretty much anti-college football, and I'm more of watching the guys that everybody has ranked in their top 50, as opposed to actually watching games, as opposed to Ron, who watches a lot of college football. I did watch Michigan State and Michigan, and it's hard for me to believe that a team that lost to Michigan State can beat Ohio State handily or even beat them at all. Is there something I'm missing, Ron, or am I kind of spot on with that?
No, I think that like first like Michigan's better. Like they changed off a lot of their staff from last year, and they kind of found a recipe which works for them, which is really running the ball. They don't have that big play explosion. They lost one of their better receivers earlier in the year, and I think that's who they use to kind of go and take the top off of defenses. They don't really have that right now, so they're really a run team with Cade McNamara as quarterback who does do some really good things. He is kind of efficient with it, but like, let's be honest, if he was at Ohio State, probably would be like the fourth quarterback coming off the bench in this scenario. So I think that that's kind of their window. Like they play better defense. I don't know if there's a pathway for them to win. Well, there's a pathway for them to win. Let's put it that way. But I don't think you're going to see a script like you're not going to get like them winning 30-10 or them winning 50-40 over Ohio State. The more scoring that happens, that's definitely going to give an advantage to Ohio State. I think they need to shorten this game out, and they need to make it seem like it's a service academy type of game where, like, we're limiting your possession, and you're going to need Ohio State to make mistakes to win this game. Because even though Michigan's improved, they just don't have the talent. Their coaching is better, but it's still not as good as the coaching, for Ohio State. And so I think that, like, I would expect Ohio State to win. I was looking at that spread for some pick'ems. I looked at it, like, last Saturday, and I was like, I'm going to get in on this at, like, I think it was 7.5 at the time. And now I see, like you were saying, it's I can get it at 7. I can get it at 8.5, and now I don't want it at all just because like there's just too much movement in it, and so that really worries me. But yeah, I feel like if there's a path for Michigan to win, they need to run the ball, need Ohio State to make mistakes, and they need to keep this game like you want the under to hit in this game. If you're a Michigan fan, if it's going over, then you're going to lose because I don't see Michigan being able to put up like 30 to 40 plus points.
So when Ohio State is on offense, I do think Michigan's defense is pretty good. When Ohio State is on offense, if Michigan can figure out any way to actually just take Olave out of the game, do you think Stroud will still be okay?
I don't think that would matter. Like, that's the thing. Like, I mean, we've seen games where, like, you've been down. First of all three of those receivers, Jackson Smith and Jibba, Chris Olave, and Garrett Wilson, all like they're going to be over 1,000 yards in the season. None of them have been nominated for the Blitman call. So that's a tragedy right there.
Yeah.
And if you want to latch on to like where Evan, the disdain for college football, this is kind of an area where like I'll join you in as far as and actually with the corruption that NCAA has. That's another podcast altogether. But like you've seen like when Garrett Wilson's out, what happened, against Nebraska, Jackson Smith, like, had over, like, 150 yards receiving, and he was just unstoppable. And there's just no one you can pinpoint, like, I'm going to stop this guy, because everyone on that team can do it. And if you do start to focus to take away one of the receivers, they're going to throw it to Travion Henderson out of the backfield. Mayan Williams is pretty good out of the backfield as well, too. Not as much speed, but he's a bruiser. And then you got Jeremy Ruckert at tight end. I mean, like, you really have to pick your poison. So who are you going to take away? Who's the most – I actually think that Garrett Wilson is the most dangerous. I think that's who Stroud relies on the most. So if I had to take one away, I would say him. But, like, that's not really a good option when you take away one guy and then you have two other guys they're probably going to be playing on Sunday sometime real soon.
I think
it's not a good advantage.
I think it's interesting that you guys were naming Ohio State receivers and nobody mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr., who's also a beast, and just the Ohio State cornucopia of receivers just is a lot of fun to watch. I don't think there's any way anybody can really guard those receivers, Ron. Is this game, at least when the Buckeyes are on offense, is this game just all about how the Buckeyes front five blocks Hutchinson and Alabu?
Yeah, I mean, because Michigan does a really good job of getting pressure without sending extra men. So, like, I think for them, what they're going to do is send those guys on obvious passing downs, try to get it to longer situations, and then really use different coverages to hopefully confuse Stroud and make it a little bit more difficult for them to be able to make those plays and those boom plays that Ohio State has in the passing game, which just are killers for like other teams. So like that would be the way to go. I don't see them really getting out of character too much and sending like 6 guys after them. On rare occasions, of course, you're going to have to, but like I just don't feel like, that's not in their character. And I feel like they've done what they've done so far this year by staying in character, running the ball, getting pressure with your front four, playing solid secondary, and on the back end as well too. And these are going to be the best lines that they've gone against. Ohio State's best line that they've gone up to this point was probably Oregon, and they didn't have Thibodeau in that game to really have to worry about. Excuse me. And also for Michigan, probably maybe Penn State, maybe Wisconsin. Those would have been the two games that they would have had somebody where they went against where it's like a really good line. So this is going to be the biggest test. But I just think historically we see this pattern of Ohio State, if they're dedicated to running the ball, that just wears out other teams. And whereas I feel like this is more of a passing attack, this team, when they really want to dominate, and they've been focused on this game since 2 years now, because they, the theory for a lot of Ohio State fans is that Michigan kind of copped out of it because we all knew what was going to happen last year. They were going to destroy Michigan, and not to make light of COVID, but it just seemed like, oh, it's convenient. Oh, we have COVID, we can't play this game. So I feel like you got all of Ohio State's attention, and they always pay attention to this game. And that line, I just feel like they're just going to be able to dominate. I don't feel like the difference in talent is enough yet for Michigan to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like for the last 20 years, Ohio State linemen have been getting drafted in the first round by blocking the supposed great pass rushers for Michigan. But that just seems like where the worry would be for Ohio State. Would it surprise you at all if I were to tell you the money line on this game was over plus 200 for Michigan, minus 300 for Ohio State, and the bets are perfectly split 50-50?
No, because nothing really surprises me when it comes to these lines. Because look, as my one buddy said, they don't build all those casinos based off of people winning.
You're right.
So
right.
Somebody knows something, off of that. That now the only thing I will say is I just can't come up with a universe unless it's a terrible windstorm, and I didn't look into that. That the over doesn't hit. I think it was 63 last time I looked at it.
It's 64.5 as of right now.
Yeah, if you go back and look over the years, so the last time they played 2019, 56-27. That Michigan team wasn't very good, but they managed to score 27 points. So we go back to 2018, Ohio State 62-39. So Michigan's good to get you at least 20 points. The year before that, 31-20. Okay, so that one, but they scored 20 points. You get 42-13 year before, 42-28. Ohio State routinely scores over 40 points in these games because they save some. And and I feel if I'm Brian Day, we owe you points from last year, and we got points that we left out on the field for Michigan State. So I just don't see in a universe where this over doesn't hit.
Yeah, and I guess if you're the way Ohio State doesn't win this football game is if they play like they did against Oregon. And I don't really want to say that the game against Nebraska was close, but it wasn't that close. But Nebraska found a way to really just, do exactly what you said Michigan wants to do. They were running the ball. They kind of held up on defense. They didn't let Ohio State blow up. Should that sort of be the path for Michigan to say, okay, let's try and do what Nebraska did, but we have more talent and we're better than Nebraska, so we'll be able to close that 9-point gap?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between the two teams. Obviously, Michigan is better coach, better talent, and in Nebraska's defense, even though they're not a good team, I'm hesitant to call them really a bad team because they've done that with everybody. Everyone they played since October has been close. I don't think they had games where they've lost more than by 3 or 4 points, and even against Ohio State, losing by say 10 is as a victory, so you really did something there. But that is definitely the blueprint. Like I said, if you look at Air Force Academy games and all the service academies, those games are short. They run all the time. They don't pass the ball that much. And if you want to gamble on those games, the unders almost always hit. I think it's 40 and like 1 or 40 and like 5 or something like that over the last like 25 years or something like that. It's like really amazing. So that's the pathway I feel like Michigan has to go. Obviously, they can make some plays in the passing game, and our secondary, well, they're improving. They're not great. It's not those guys. Like, you don't have a Jeffrey Okudah. You don't have a Marshawn Lattimore. You don't have guys where, like, they're just like, don't throw over here because it ain't going to happen, So they don't have those guys yet. They're not those guys yet. So they can still make those plays. And I trust McNamara making more plays than, say, Martinez for Nebraska. So, yeah, I think that's the way to go. But, like, still, I just don't think it's going to be enough, even on the road. And, like, Ohio State seems to, like, learn from their mistakes, especially under Ryan Day. I think, like, the Purdue game was, like, your perfect example of that. Like, with Urban Meyer, this was a game that they would have lost. Like, Purdue's been catching people. You're playing it after a week that you had a good opponent. And, they've been catching everybody else. They're going to catch you, too. And Ohio State had none of that, So, Ryan Day seems to have learned from that. That's like the big improvement from Urban Meyer to Ryan Day, is that they don't have those games. And honestly, Ryan Day just has yet to lose a Big Ten game. I mean, let's call it out. I mean, he hasn't lost one yet. So, like, I kind of got to give the guy credit until, like, I'll believe it when it happens,
Yeah,
and then,
I wonder,
then when it happens.
I wonder how much of that 50% of the money line on Michigan is just gamblers throwing some money at they got to fucking lose one eventually, right? Even if this isn't the one, this looks like one that could be. Like, I don't know, but I'm curious how much of that is just, I've made a ton of money on Ohio State. I'm just going to throw some hedge money at Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and it's like I said, and over the holiday weekend, I feel like people bet more. Anyway.
Yeah,
They're just
you're right.
like, I got to do something.
You're right. So, Ron, would you say the team that wins this game wins the Big Ten and gets into the top 4?
Yeah, I think this is like a play. Like, there's a spot in the playoff for the Big Ten champion.
Right.
And that's assuming it's Ohio State or Michigan. I think if Wisconsin wins, I think it's still like there's a lot of I can see a scenario where they don't go.
Yeah.
But like if Ohio State wins, I'm assuming Ohio State goes on to beat Wisconsin. If Michigan wins, I can see where Michigan would win, but I feel like there's a much smaller margin for Michigan to win that game than it is Ohio State. And so, like, let's play that out. Let's say Michigan beats Ohio State. So, obviously, Ohio State's out. They're 2 losses. They're not in their conference championship game. So, Michigan goes in. They lose to Wisconsin. I can see where, like, the committee might say, look, as much as we like Wisconsin, I believe Wisconsin has, 3 losses already this season.
Yeah, so
I can't put them in. There's no precedent for, 2 teams, let alone three-loss teams.
So, I am a firm believer. I fully believe, I think Alabama's going to fuck it all up by beating Georgia, to be totally honest with you. I think they're going to find a way to just muck it all up. But I also think, that's probably the only path for Cincinnati to stay in the top 4, because I think the winner of the Big 12 is probably going to jump Cincinnati for the 4th spot.
I can see that. It's really hard to determine how the committee really feels about Cincinnati. They play against Eastern Carolina tonight. This afternoon. So, we'll see. Eastern Carolina is no slouch. So, obviously, if Eastern Carolina comes in and bites Cincinnati and beats them, or let's say Cincinnati wins, but it's, a lot closer than what they feel it should be, then that could be enough to catapult some team over them as well, too. Because, obviously, if Michigan wins, they're jumping. Michigan's going to jump Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Notre Dame could potentially jump up and get in there as well, too. So, I just don't see I feel like Cincinnati's the most volatile of them. But, I definitely think that, I think you can count Georgia. Georgia's already in.
Yep.
Georgia can lose, and they're still going to go. I'm not as convinced that Alabama beats Georgia. I feel like it feels like the right thing to say. And when you watch Alabama, their offense seems to be really good, but they don't seem to be their defense is similar to how Ohio State's defense is. And it's good enough, but not dominant like they used to be. And I feel like that's the issue. Where Georgia's defense, it's going to be hard to score against Georgia. And Alabama's offense is good. Ohio State's offense is a step above them, I feel like, but like that's not a big step. But like I'm not exactly sold on Alabama beating them. And obviously, if they lose, and I feel like they're out, even though the committee would love to keep them in there, they desperately want Alabama to win that game. They want them out.
I think for historical context, it's important to remember that the committee, since its inception, has always gone out of its way not just to help Alabama, but to help the SEC. And that 100% of the time, when the selection committee has had the chance to take a non-Power 5 team, they have not done so. Like they're not going to until they're forced to. And like this gets into kind of the corruption as I see it, but ESPN still airs the BCS games, or did they lose the contract? The most recent one.
ESPN still so ESPN still has the playoffs. BCS obviously is just gone. I mean, like there's
the playoffs. Yeah, just to me, it's all the same shit. You just have a smaller group of people making the selections instead of the voters and the computers. But like they'll just, I will continue to say ESPN airs these playoff games, and ESPN has a contract with the SEC. There is a direct conflict of interest in how ESPN covers the SEC and what is their influence as a media partner in terms of making sure that SEC teams get favorable treatment in this selection process. Because as an outsider to college football, it looks like the selection committee does everything it can to help the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, no. So, like, here's the thing too. Like, also, like, because I know obviously this season started off with like the big move of Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. That's just
going to be crazy.
Yeah, and it kills the entire vibe of like the Big 12. The Big 12 is basically going to be like kind of a dead conference in a lot of ways based off of that. But it started off with the expansion of the playoffs, which like I'm not a favor of a 12 team. I think 6 is a really good number. I think 8 is pretty good too.
I like 8.
But 12 is 12 is just too many. Because like if you look at the top 12 right now, I have no interest in watching Michigan State play any more games. I have no interest in watching Oregon play any more games. I've seen enough. You could kind of talk me into Oklahoma State or maybe Oklahoma, but like 12 is just, a high number in my opinion. So I feel like part of it is pushing because they want the money. So obviously Ohio State, big name, people who love them or hate them. They're usually pretty exciting to watch, and they travel well and they bring in money. Same thing with Alabama, same thing with Georgia, same thing with Notre Dame, same thing with Michigan. So you want those teams in there. Now, they haven't gotten a Pac-12 team in because they just honestly just haven't been good enough. So I think if you do get to an expansion point, you'll see like more like of a pathway for Cincinnati to go in. Because if it was like top 6 right now, I can't imagine a scenario where Cincinnati doesn't get in.
Right.
You're going to take them over. And if you look at the top 10 teams right now, there's Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Those are the only SEC teams in there. So, like, I feel like they're slanted towards the SEC, but I also feel like they're kind of biased towards, like, the Big Ten in some ways, too. I feel like they just don't like the Pac-12 because they just don't. And if you look at the network, SEC brings in a lot of money. Who else brings in a lot of money? The Big Ten network.
Yep.
Yeah,
those are the two that bring in the
and
most money.
with the West Coast teams, they're just East Coast reporters want to ignore West Coast teams, and the Pac-12 has done a good job of obliging them the last 5 years or so. They just haven't fielded teams that were really quite as good.
Right. I mean, I don't believe have they been back to the playoffs since the Mariota game?
Mariota, that takes me back.
It's like one of the last college football games I actually watched.
But so I've kept looking at this, and I've been thinking about this a lot of ways, Ron. So let's go your route, and let's say Alabama loses. So that gets Alabama out of there. Cincinnati wins out. Oklahoma or Oklahoma State win the Big 12. Does Notre Dame then get in? Or does Oklahoma or Oklahoma State get that 4th spot?
So
or the 3rd spot, I guess I'll say.
So, like, we're assuming Georgia wins out, Ohio State wins out. So those two teams went out; they're automatically in. They're 1 and 2, more than likely.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're looking to fill 3 and 4. We're assuming that Cincinnati wins out.
Yes.
Okay, so we got our 3. So it's really between Notre Dame. They don't play another game. It didn't hurt them the last time.
Right.
They were in the situation. Although I did see a tweet from Danny Cadell that said, like, Notre Dame should basically just call up BYU and schedule a game for this week. I mean, we saw that happen.
Yeah,
that'd be smart. And it's a wonderful idea because, like, it gets you on the tape. And BYU is ranked.
Yeah.
You know, so it's good for BYU.
Yeah.
So it can only build your resume a little bit more. I feel like if Oklahoma State and the winner of the Pac-12 would be the one, I would see them leaping forward over Notre Dame. They don't play. We're easily to be victims in the moment. Both of those teams are one loss. If you really look at it, I feel like they really want Oklahoma in. Let's call it what it is. Yep. They want Oklahoma in. Yep. They want Lincoln Riley in there. They want Spencer Rattler in there because of the drama that he had. They want Caleb Williams in there. So, like, I feel like if Oklahoma wins, I feel like that's the team that could do a lot of jumping because obviously Michigan would lose. They're gone. They're out of there. Mississippi, no matter what they do, I just don't think they're going to get 2 SEC teams in. I think when they're imagining 2 SEC teams in, they're not imagining that one in there.
No, not at all.
And like we said, we just haven't seen a scenario where there's been 2 teams, where a 2-loss team has made the playoff. I feel like that's not going to happen until we get to expansion.
Yeah, I agree. And but I keep wondering if they're going to leave Cincinnati at 4, so Cincinnati has to play Georgia. So they can then say, look, this is what happens when your little rinky-dink conference champions, no matter how many wins they have, play one of the best teams in the country. Like, do you think, could you see Cincinnati just staying at 4 and being forced to play Georgia?
Yeah, I could see that. And, like, I feel like you already know what's going to happen once you see Oklahoma play them once. And I feel like you have that kind of like that from last year where you got Georgia and Cincinnati. Yeah. So you get that rematch appeal. So that's going to be appealing to some people. Let's say that Oklahoma doesn't get in and Alabama does get in. So, like, I feel like they're going to keep Alabama and Georgia away from each other.
I would
You're not going to make them play back to – so, like, say they're not going to move Ohio State up to 1.
No.
They'll probably have Alabama at 1, Georgia at 2, Ohio State 3, and then whoever is in at 4. But, yeah, I feel like they'd rather see a rematch between Georgia and Georgia and Cincinnati, because that was a good game.
Yeah.
And then Ohio State versus Oklahoma, I feel like that's one that you could sell as well, too. I also feel like you could probably sell, like, in some way if Oklahoma did make it in, and it was like the 4 were Georgia, Ohio State, Cincinnati, and then Oklahoma. I feel like you could also sell that very well, Georgia versus Oklahoma. We've seen that one. That is a rematch from a playoff series from Baker Mayfield. Yeah. And then you could also have the Battle of Ohio with Ohio State versus Cincinnati. So, I mean, there's a lot of storylines, and it depends on what you can sell as well, too. And those would probably be the 2 best games because they just don't want to have, like, an elimination game. It's not like it was 2 years ago where you had Ohio State versus Clemson, and everybody wanted to see that game, and LSU versus who was it? I can't remember who they played in the first round before they got there with Joe Burrow. This memory just slipped me. But they were both good matchups. Yeah. They were both good matchups. So you knew, like, no matter what, you were getting a good game.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's make some official picks for Ohio State, Michigan. Ron, who are you taking in this game? Ohio State -7.
I'm taking Ohio State. With -7, I just that's too easy of a number to pass up on. And I do a pick 'em with some friends of mine. We all pick 3 games a week. And I haven't been on with Ohio State. So the only thing I took with Ohio State was the over for points. And, like, I don't want to jinx them with that -7, but that is a great number. And even if you're not betting on it, I just love, until they lose, you have to keep picking them as long as they look competent, and they do look competent.
Jimmy, who do you like tomorrow?
Give me Ohio State -7 and give me the over.
Yeah, I like the over. I like Ohio State to win. I'm not making any picks against the spread for this game because my picks have been atrocious this year, and I want no part of jinxing the only college football game I've watched for the last couple of years. It's just, I mean, you have to watch this game as an Ohio citizen. It's part of our tradition, and I always like to joke to people that aren't from Ohio. I was like, he's like, you don't have a red Ohio State hoodie? I thought they just appeared in outsiders' apartments once they moved here. Like, it's just waiting for you when you come in.
So, my father-in-law has this thought about Harbaugh. He says, I never want Harbaugh to leave Michigan because he keeps Michigan relevant and he cannot beat Ohio State. So he's the perfect coach for Michigan.
He's John Cooper.
Dude,
he really
He's
is.
John Cooper.
Except John has 2 wins.
So
and John could at least beat Michigan State most of the time.
So do you guys think this game, do you think Harbaugh gets fired if they lose this game?
No.
I think they designed this contract. I think that it goes to who are you going to replace him with?
Yeah.
That's going to elevate. And I don't feel like there's anybody that, like, they don't have anybody in house, and they seem to be really hung up on a Michigan man type of thing.
Right.
Because when they didn't do that, it didn't work out for them before. So who are you going to get that would be perfect for them, that will elevate their talent and also be able to recruit at a high level? And a lot of people were talking about, like, Matt Campbell, like, from Iowa State. I like Matt Campbell, but, like, he's not, like, an exceptionally big recruiter, and he doesn't really elevate his talent that much. He does better with what he does have. He does elevate him to a certain degree, but, like, I just don't think that's a big jump. You're not going to go out and start out-recruiting Ohio State. Like, James Franklin is a pretty good recruiter, and he has a pretty big program over in Penn State, and he got a contract extension, and he can't do it. And you would think that with Michigan, with Harbaugh, the perfect example is Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yeah.
Number 1 wide receiver in his class, went to Michigan, underwhelmed the entire time he was there, goes in the NFL, gets some better coaching, and looks a lot better. And that's just, like, the most mind-boggling thing, because Herb said that he went after him.
Yeah.
So, like, and he just didn't get him. And so that's, like, the mistake that, like, the guy made, that he picked the wrong school to go to, or he would have probably been drafted, like, in the first 2 or 3 rounds. And I just don't see them replacing him unless I just don't know who you replace him with. Maybe, like, if you were going to get, like, Brian Kelly, but that's a downgrade in some ways for him. And there's no, like, young up-and-coming coach that really just wants to come to Michigan. Like, Fickle would probably be your best chance, and I don't know if he'd take that job.
Yeah, I remember, me and you talked wide receivers a lot before the draft, arguing about Smith and Chase. And when I looked up their recruiting class, I could not believe that Peoples-Jones was the number 1 recruit coming out. Like, that was just wild to me.
Yeah. And I know you want to go on to, like, some of the other stuff, but, like, Brian Hartline is probably the most valuable coach in, like, all of college football right now. He is just, what he's doing for the wide receiving room at Ohio State is just absolutely ridiculous. They have, like, so many, the fact that, like, Jamison Williams can leave Ohio State because 2 people came back, and he can go to Alabama and be a Biletnikoff Award winner there, just tells you the talent they have in that room. It's just really amazing.
Yeah, here at No Broken Legs, we always have time for assistant coach talk. Always. Because people don't value it enough. They don't realize how important that actually is. When you've got great leaders inside your position groups at both levels, college and pros, it makes a big difference in your week-to-week game planning.
It does. It really does make a difference. In Ohio State, that's where they really made the biggest difference. They've always recruited positions well. Like, I'm not a big fan of Kerry Coombs, but Larry Johnson coming from Penn State over to Ohio State made a huge difference. I mean, a huge difference, especially once you get some Bosa and you get some Chase Youngs. And now they have Jack Sawyer, and they have Tulamalo, and then they have there's a rumor that they're getting another one. Another top 3 DN pick coming in. So, like, I mean, it makes it a lot easier for you as a head coach when you have assistants that can go ahead and carry out and execute this plan for you and keep the pipeline going.
All right. Well, we'll wrap up right there, Ron. Thank you for joining us to talk some college football in Ohio State.
No, anytime. I'm glad to jump on, and thanks for keeping me in your fantasy leagues too. It's hard, but I set my lineup every week, and that's all I can do with 10 teams. So.
Yeah, it's been a bad fantasy year. I feel like everybody on like a requirement to be on my fantasy team this year is you have to miss 3 games. I've just been jinxing everybody this season.
It's just the way it is. I think longer season, COVID, there's always a reason for someone not to play. So
yeah, and Jimmy, thank you for joining as well.
No place I'd rather be, brother.
Alrighty, and thank you for listening. For Ron Brown and Jimmy Champ, I am Evan Belfiore. We will have our NFL and Picks podcast following this one either tonight or tomorrow morning. Until then, we are no broken legs.
Every action has a repercussion. Lyrical bullets don't make me get the bussin'.